Titanfall's legacy is a complicated one. The first was one of many games released that year, back in 2014, that somehow failed to meet expectations. What was here was good, but there just wasn't enough of it. There wasn't enough customization or progression to satisfy Call of Duty lifers, no single-player campaign, and a dwindling player base made the game an unappealing proposition in the months following launch. But Titanfall was still a game that many adored. It garnered good buzz and an above-average score on Metacritic. And the reason why most people still praise Titanfall, despite all of its flaws, was the way it moved, its sense of speed. There was a frenetic element here that had been missing from the shooter scene for so long that it felt refreshing, even though in many ways it echoed the frantic spirit of arena shooters from the late 90s and early 2000s. Everyone spent so much time talking about Titanfall's pilots and how they moved, that I sometimes forgot it was ultimately a game about giant robots kicking the shit out of each other. The key differentiator between Titanfall and other shooters was never the Titans. It was this. In the time between Titanfall and Titanfall 2, more games followed suit. And going into Titanfall 2, the series could no longer rely on its movement to make it unique. The emphasis had to switch back to the Titans. The only problem was that Titan play was never compelling. It was a total missed opportunity. I preferred my time on the ground as a pilot, and getting inside a Titan was a drag. I want to talk about what Respawn did to fix all of this, about why Titanfall's legacy is so special, why it's still worth talking about, and why it will still be worth talking about long after our gaming forgets about it. This is Carlos Pineda, a game designer at Respawn Entertainment. He discussed Titanfall 2's challenges at length in a great GDC talk released last March. And as I listened, I kept thinking of that Sid Meier's quote. You know the one.
This thing kept popping up over and over again. Sid Meier says, games are a series of interesting decisions. And some people felt that was the most brilliant statement ever made in terms of games. And some people felt, Sid Meier, what an idiot.
Games are a series of interesting decisions, sure. But those decisions will be less or more compelling based on their rhythm and variation. A game that serves up the same decision every 10 seconds is not fun. Compelling modern-day shooters need to serve up a variety of decisions that come at different intervals and work at different levels in a player's subconscious. According to Carlos, every decision we make in a shooter belongs in one of three layers. The atomic layer, these are the decisions we're making every moment, where to shoot, how to move. The tactical layer, where we assess the current map and game state. We decide where enemies are and how to approach. Then there's the strategic layer, when we look at our loadout, our team comp, and decide what kind of equipment we need to bring to the fight. If you somehow counted every decision made while playing a game of Team Deathmatch, 99% of them, the overwhelming majority, happen at the atomic level. We need a constant drip of split-second decisions to make multiplayer games interesting. And that's easy to do in a low time to kill game. You decide where to aim, when to shoot, and a moment later you're either dead or alive. On to your next decision. A lot of people talk about the pros and cons of low time to kill games like Call of Duty, versus shooters with a longer time to kill, like Halo. But even Halo's time to kill of about 5 to 10 seconds isn't that long, especially compared to Titan combat, where time to kill could be upwards of half a minute. As time to kill increases, the time between decisions increases as well, and that atomic layer that Carlos talked about, it works as a foundation for compelling gameplay, and as the space between decisions increases, it starts to crumble. That's why stuff like this, and this, and this isn't compelling. So how do you fix Titans? Titan play had to be fundamentally different than what happened on the ground, but the answer wasn't taking standard shooter gameplay and increasing the health bar. It had to be intrinsically different, and maybe the world of shooters wasn't the best place to look for inspiration. The high TTK in Titan fights is probably more comparable to fighters or MOBAs anyway, games concentrated on character abilities, synergies, and combos. Since Titans take so long to kill, we can usually tell which Titan we're fighting and what they're capable of. That means Titans can have more complex abilities like those found in MOBAs and fighters, abilities that go beyond speedier reloads and increased damage. The first Titanfall looked at Titans' high time to kill as a way to differentiate Titans from pilots. Titanfall 2 saw high time to kill as an opportunity to add more strategy and movesets. Titan fights still felt methodical, but dynamic in a way that's missing from most first-person shooters. Stuff like Scorch's Firewall and Ion's Tripwire, abilities that affect the map in semi-permanent ways, force players to constantly consider their position in relation to the enemies. Meanwhile, Tone's Particle Wall and Northstar's Tether Traps help support nearby allies and create team roles, forcing players to consider their teammates. Titan's high time to kill also allows for combos to exist, abilities like Scorch's Incendiary Trap, and stuff like that helps foster a play environment where Titan synergy is possible. A favorite strategy of mine is to use Ronin's Arcwave to slow enemies while a friendly Legion heaps on damage. These additions, semi-permanent abilities, team roles, combos, and synergies, helped create a new layer that Pineda calls technique. Somewhere between the atomic and tactical layer, players start asking themselves a new set of questions. They start assessing the board state. What abilities should I use? What are our team composition strengths? And what are their weaknesses? Should I save this ability for an opportune time, or use it now? This new layer forces players to examine Titan fights in a distinct and compelling way. And it's only possible because of Titan's large health pool. Abilities like these would be useless in any low time to kill game, since it would almost always be more effective to just kill the enemy outright. When people talk about Titanfall's legacy, they'll probably mention that the first release was a disappointment. They'll probably talk about how the second game didn't sell well because of its unfortunate release date, sandwiched between two juggernauts. They'll call Titanfall 2 an underrated gem, even though it's not really underrated at this point. And they'll lament its dwindling player base. And it definitely is dwindling. But I don't see many people talk about what the game did with its design. How instead of simply adding on content, it evolved, it grew. How it took something totally acceptable and rethought it from the ground up, from square one, no holds barred. Totally deconstructed and redesigned, Titan Combat in Titanfall 2 shares only surface level similarities with its predecessor. And it might not seem like much, but the fact that Respawn sat down, really considered what was working and what wasn't, is unfortunately a rarity in today's industry. We live in the world of the fast turnaround, where a polished sequel released every 2 years with more content, more guns, more characters is enough for most people. It's enough to make money, and it's enough to break that coveted 85 on Metacritic. I'm not saying Titanfall 2 is without its issues or that's the holy grail of first-person shooters, but it is something to celebrate, some standard we should hold franchises to, instead of just accepting yearly releases and season passes. That's what Titanfall 2's legacy means to me, why it's still worth talking about. And if you haven't played it yet, go grab a copy. The single-player campaign won't disappoint, and I obviously adore the multiplayer. The one downside, which I feel like I'd be doing a disservice if I didn't mention, is that there is no skill-based matchmaking. It's a shame too, because the game's multiplayer is so well designed, but teams rarely feel evenly matched. Thanks so much for watching, guys. If you liked the video, please like, subscribe, all that good stuff. If you loved the video, then the best way to support the channel is by visiting the Patreon page and becoming a patron. The link is below in the description. As always, stay tuned. There's more to come. See you next time.